All right, today we're jumping into one of the most foundational stories in all of Western literature, Homer's Iliad. And this whole epic tale, it all kicks off not with armies or grand strategies, but with the wounded pride of one single, very angry man.
And that's him. This is the moment. That raw insult is hurled by the unstoppable warrior Achilles at his own commander, Agamemnon. This isn't just a disagreement. It's the spark that's about to set the whole world on fire and completely change the course of a 10-year war.
Because, the Iliad is so much more than just a war story. It's this incredible deep dive into rage, into honor, and into fate. And it's been echoing through our culture for almost 3,000 years, asking this timeless question, what's the real cost of our own passions?
Okay, so here's how we're going to break this epic down. We're going to look at 5 key pieces to really get why this ancient poem still hits so hard today. And we'll start with that personal feud that changes absolutely everything.
Right, so the final bloody phase of the entire Trojan War doesn't kick off because of some grand strategy or political move. Nope. It all hinges on a deeply personal fight between two very powerful guys. Now you have to remember, in this Bronze Age honor culture, this is a huge deal. This isn't just a squabble over loot. Taking Briseis is a public and, frankly, a profound humiliation. She represents his status, his value as a warrior. So Agamemnon is basically telling the greatest fighter in the world that he's worthless. And Achilles, well, he responds by just quitting. He pulls himself and his men from the battle in this cold, calculated rage. But here's the thing. This very human drama, it's not happening in a vacuum. Up on Mount Olympus, the gods are watching. And they're not just spectators. They're active, they are invested, and honestly, they're often just playing games. Yeah, this has very little to do with cosmic justice. Take Poseidon, god of the sea. At one point, he jumps in to save the Trojan hero Aeneas from getting killed by Achilles. Why? Not because it's the right thing to do. He does it because Zeus has decided that Aeneas' family line is destined to survive the war. It's a move based on divine politics and pre-written fate, not good versus evil. And this is where it gets really interesting when you compare them to other ancient cultures. In a lot of Near Eastern traditions, the gods were there to back up the kings, right? To legitimize their power. But the Greek gods? Oh man. They seem to exist to complicate things, to disrupt mortal plans, and use humanity's greatest war as their own personal chessboard. So with all this divine meddling from above, you end up with a very specific and very intense warrior culture down on the ground, one that is completely obsessed with achieving personal glory no matter what it costs. If you really want to get inside the heads of heroes like Achilles or the Trojan hero Hector, you have to understand this one Greek word, Aretê. This is the engine that drives them. It's this belief that your whole goal in life is to achieve excellence, to be the absolute best, and to have that glory remembered forever, even if it means you have to die young to get it. And Homer does not pull any punches when he shows you the grim reality of that ideal. Achieving Aretê was not some clean, philosophical goal. It was violent, it was gruesome, and it was often incredibly short. Homer forces you to see the horror of Bronze Age combat, reminding us that for every single moment of glory, there is a mountain of suffering. So for centuries, most people just dismissed the Trojan War as pure fiction. A great story, sure, but just a story. But what if there's a kernel of real history buried deep inside all that epic poetry? And that question has driven archaeologists and historians crazy for generations. Was the legendary city of Troy a real place? And was there a real war that sparked Homer's masterpiece? What's so amazing here is how the timeline lines up. You've got a real Bronze Age city at a place now called Hisarlik, with clear archaeological evidence that it was violently destroyed. Then, a few hundred years later, this powerful story about that very event starts to be written down and solidified. It's pretty compelling. And this really gets to the heart of how our foundational myths get made, doesn't it? A real event happens, its story gets told and retold, growing bigger and more epic with every generation, until it becomes something more than history. It becomes a legend. So, after all this, the wrath, the gods, the war, why do we still care? Why does this ancient story still have such a powerful grip on our imagination thousands of years later? Well, I think the Iliad lasts because it works on so many different levels all at once. For the ancient Greeks, it was a story that unified their culture. For leaders like Alexander the Great, it was practically a textbook on ambition and leadership. And for us today, it is still this profound, unflinching look at the best and the absolute worst parts of human nature.
At the end of the day, the poem forces us to look at the devastating consequences of our own pride, of our own rage. It shows how the intense feelings of just one person can bring an entire world to its knees, and that's a lesson that is just as relevant today as it was in the Bronze Age. And that leaves us with a pretty compelling thought to end on, doesn't it? If a story as huge as the Trojan War might have started with a real city and a real conflict, what other little kernels of truth might be buried underneath the great stories we tell ourselves today?